Yes, namaste. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on Reconstructing Hindu History. Raj Vedam. I'm Ankur Patel, the Director of Outreach for Hindu Unity. Pleasure to be hosting today's webinar. If you haven't yet, please put in the chat where you're zooming in from, and we'll give you a shout out. But let us get started. And to give some background, it wasn't until like the 19th century, really the late 1700s, the early 1800s, that world history became a critically important discipline. And it was mainly because of the European project of constructing a world history and emerged from the discovery, the so-called discovery of lands and peoples previously unknown to them. And in this project of theirs, they subsumed the whole Hindu civilization into a Eurocentric grand narrative. And so, as Hindus, we're embarking upon the vitally important project of reclaiming our own history in the light of so many different evidences and different multiple fields of knowledge. It becomes imperative that we reconcile facts, hypotheses, and theories in a viable interdisciplinary synthesis. And in this webinar, Dr. Raj Vedam will examine the enormous contributions made by ancient and medieval Indians, Hindus in the fields of math, astronomy, medicine, and more, the impact that they've had on world knowledge systems. And Dr. Vedam will also highlight some of the distortions enforced by colonial historians that negates Indian contributions to knowledge systems. This is a major project of Hindu University of America, and we are so glad that we have Dr. Raj Vedam leading the way on this. Dr. Vedam himself is an interdisciplinary master. I've had the privilege of taking two courses with Dr. Vedam at Hindu University of America. He himself has earned his master's degree in electrical engineering, and then also a PhD in electrical engineering from Oregon State University in the United States. He's got over 26 years of professional experience in power, electronic design, automation, and oil and gas industries. And he's worked in applied mathematics and engineering across multiple disciplines. He's got several patents and international journal and conference publications. But it is because of this confluence of factors and his work at the confluence of applied mathematics, engineering's algorithms, computer science, and using the tools of archaeogenetics, archaeoastronomy, archaeology, and pursuing evidence of knowledge transfers from ancient India that we have Dr. Raj Vedam, and he has put forward a strong thesis with verifiable facts, peer-reviewed journal publications, and he's made so many presentations on the antiquity of the Indian civilization and the many discoveries made in ancient India. Again, he's delivered so many lectures. He's taught several courses at Hindu University of America. He's a sought-after speaker, and he likes to deliver presentations on the subject of scientific validation of the narratives on history of India. Um, and again, we're just so glad to have Dr. Raj Vedam with us today teaching this course. And I'm looking forward to a presentation as always, Dr. Vedam. Even though I've seen it, I've been in your class every time. I know you bring in new information, you apply it to the context that we're in, and it's always exciting and interesting to have you on for a webinar. So with that, let me hand it to Dr. Raj Vedam to reconstruct Hindu history for us, at least begin that project.
Okay, thank you so much, Ankur, for that introduction. Uh, and at some point, we need to revise some of these things. I've always been at 26 years of work experience for the last 5 years or 6 years. So we need to make sure we update that also. So anyway, so welcome everybody, namaste, and very happy that you all joined this webinar. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so let me hide this. Okay, so the objective of today's webinar is to introduce this course that I will be offering soon at Hindu University of America, which is titled Reconstructing Hindu History. It's a little provocative, but then there are reasons for that. And it's a two-part course. The first part is the commissions. Who are the people who contributed to the narrative of history that we have, and how we can address those claims. And the second part would be the knowledge systems itself. I know Ankur described this webinar as highlighting the knowledge systems, but that's the second part. So I will touch upon that here, but I will not expand on that. And this is more of an introductory kind of thing. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, before we start. So all of our problems in history originate from a speculative theory that has been put on us. And what is the speculative theory, you might ask, and how did this come about? So this came about when the colonialists, they started in and some of them, for example, William Jones, way back 1700s, this man, he discovered that Sanskrit, Latin, and Greek are related. He was befuddled. How is this possible? Why are these languages related? What is the relationship of the Europeans to the Indians? Why on earth are the languages related? So he postulated they probably had a common ancestor, and he sowed the roots of this Aryanness in his writings and so on. But such a theory took time to more or less consolidate, and by the time we come to Max Muller, who lived in this time frame, 1823 to 1900, by that time it was consolidated that there was a common ancestral language called Proto-Indo-European, and these were spoken by what they call as Aryans, inverted quotes, who lived in a place in Central Asia. All these notions have become entrenched by the time Max Muller's work was done, and a bunch of linguists had come on the scene trying to understand these things. And if you fast forward a little more and go to Mortimer Wheeler, archaeologists such as him, for example, from John Marshall, who discovered the Harappa civilization ruins over there, and coming on to Mortimer Wheeler in 1890 to 1976. So this man, he introduced a notion that look at the ruins in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. This is clear evidence in archaeology, according to him, that, and obviously the Rig Veda, which to him was a war manual. These Aryans who had come to India and destroyed all the forts and cities in their wake, to him it was a war manual and clinching proof that Aryans had invaded India from Central Asia and destroyed the superior civilization of Indus Valley civilization. So this is the kind of narrations that took place in the colonial literature, starting with observing the connectedness of languages, going on to these kind of assertions. So what is this Aryan invasion, which has today become a migration theory? So it says that bands of male warriors, very important, each of these keywords is important. It has got to be male, because there is no trace from Central Asia in the genetic record, which means only males have come. And it is not one huge migration, but there are bands at several times different people have come. So bands from Central Asia invaded or migrated to India around 1500. They replaced the existing civilization, genetically overwhelmed it, everything, and they replaced them. And they brought an entirely new Vedic religion, Sanskrit language, Vedic. These are the claims that have been put forward to this Aryan invasion or migration theory. And the primary methodology to support this was linguistics. Later on, the finds at Harappa were subverted to try and fit this theory. And today it has become a much bigger story, because the West, if they want to address who they are as a people, they have to ask, who are the Indians? If you can answer who, then you can answer who the Westerners are. So in support of this theory, and to put some genetic distance between Indians and the Europeans, the Aryans have been constructed in Central Asia, from where one wave has become the Europeans and the last wave has come towards India and they become the Northern Indians at least, and so on. So these are the theories. So what is the impact of this? We have so many questionable narratives. So there is something that I call evidence-based history, where using multidisciplinary methods, you can uncover a lot of facts. And there is something we can call questionable narrative of history, which is thrust on us through NCRT textbooks, state textbooks, the narrative in media, and other such things. So we can show that Bharat is an ancient civilization, but in their narrative, we have become a recent civilization. We can show that all over India, we are similar people, but then they say after the Aryan invasion, we have become Aryans, Dravidians, tribal people, and all these kind of uneasy mix of people over here. We can show through evidence that knowledge systems in India developed independently, but according to their narrative, knowledge systems developed with input from Babylon and Greece. We can show that Vedanta is humane, enlightened philosophies, but they position us as aggressive, uncivilized, inhumane philosophies with caste and all this kind of nonsense. That's how they present us. We can show that Indian knowledge systems impacted all other civilizations. They say other civilizations impacted Indian knowledge systems. So here we are. We have a completely opposite set of narratives based compared to what they've been the last 100 years, 200 years, and textbooks and so on. So the common person obviously is at a loss. What do you believe? What do you believe? Do you believe this claim? Do you believe that claim? Do you go the pedigree? This author is from JNU, that author is from Columbia, Harvard. Do we trust these people, or what do we do? So we need some kind of a rational way of analyzing this knowledge systems, and I'll come to that in just a minute. But to reinforce the idea, we can see that these corruptions have happened over 300 years. And what are these claims? I call these things different actors over here. Colonial hegemony, people like Portuguese, Dutch, French, British, with the imperialistic model, right? So they, hand in hand with Christian imperialism, what I call missionary model, people like Caldwell, Pope, and others, hand in hand with Eurocentric model, the linguistic model, and others, with methodology of linguistics, anthropology, caste, and all these kind of things. They have resulted in the consolidation of notions on the so-called Aryan or invasion or migration theory. For example, the Christians, they came with the idea that Hindus are a post-flood religion. Post-flood meaning Noah's flood, right? After Noah's flood, this is come from that. And they brought the idea that Hinduism is caste-ridden system, and that Dravidians are an oppressed people, and Brahminical Aryans are evil. All these fundamental ideas were introduced by the missionaries for the purpose of converting Indians, alienate them from, especially the southern Indian, alienate them from the Vedanta religion, and then convert them. So with those notions, these kind of ideas came about. Now, in colonial and Eurocentric ideas, for example, William Jones tried to make the equation that Sandrokotos, who's mentioned in the Indica by Megasthenes, a Greek who came apparently around 300 BCE, he referenced a ruler called Sandrokotos, which phonetically William Jones identified as Chandragupta Maurya. Only problem is, in the Puranic chronology, the Mauryas are placed to 1500 to 1200 BCE. Whereas according to William Jones' recalibration, it became 300 BC. So these kind of distortions of the Puranic literature happened, chronology happened, with their kind of ideas. They also introduced the notion that Sanskrit is a daughter language of Proto-Indo-European, the ancestral language. And in their theories, these people called Aryans had to be in India in 1500 BCE. They presented Harappa later on, after it was discovered in late 1800s and 1900s. It was presented as isolate. We don't know anything about these people, don't know their script, don't know their religion, don't know anything about them. But they could be Dravidians, people who were living there, driven to the south. This is the kind of ideas. They also presented the notion that India has got two language families, right? Till then, everybody thought it's all the same language family. They introduced India's got two language families. They also got the idea that introduced a notion that Indians are backward, primitive, superstitious, stagnant society, all these kind of things. And so these are the convergent ideologies of these people. Different actors, colonialists wanted to rule India, to loot India, to rob India. Christians wanted to convert Indians. The Eurocentric people wanted to put distance between Indians and Western Europe, right? The white people, and these kind of racism ideas. Convergent ideologies has led to this. And you might think that, today we live in enlightened times and we don't think this is all relevant. Unfortunately, that is not true. This is a received wisdom for our academia. Whatever the colonialists, missionaries, Eurocentric people said is purchased unquestioningly. Unquestioningly, our academia, socialists and Marxists have taken this up, and they also impose outsider sociology on us using models that are developed for the Western experience of slavery, of treatment of women, other such things. Those models are imported and force fit on India. So that is what our academia, socialists and Marxists, continue to do today by importing this oppressor-oppressed kind of model, and today with wokeism, victimhood, all these kind of things. And they also co-opt archaeology. So archaeological finds are used by them, subverted to try to fit these kind of theories. And today you also have genetics, right? Genetics is a big thing. So the genetics results are also made to align with linguistic model assumptions. You have big players like David Reich from Harvard Medical School and others. Once again, we are seeing that these three use circular dependencies and there are questionable assumptions. In this short webinar, I can't give you the full details. The course goes in detail over each of these things and we try to talk about these things. But bottom line is, these things directly impact who we are as Bharatiya people. What is our identity? That is all controlled by all of these kind of narratives. So we learn that up to 5 frameworks have been imposed on the historiography of India. The historiography is the process of writing history. Indians have had a very satisfying notion of history with the Itihasas, with the Puranas, with the Sthala Puranas, with the genealogies of families that are maintained in various towns, with folk songs, folk tales, dance forms. We have got a certain idea of history, including epigraphy in temples, you find all these kind of things. But when the British came to India, the colonial people, they the history of India for the civil servants. So they started writing the history of India in a certain way to show Indians as backward, primitive, and these kind of things. And Eurocentric people too layered upon this with linguistics ideas and all these kind of things. Missionaries, wherever the colonial people went, missionaries are also with them, trying to convert the people to Christianity. They introduced the notion of evil Brahmins and so on. Then after India got independence, we unfortunately got Nehruvian socialism thrust on us, and that came with its own notions of oppressor, oppressed, borrowing from Marxist models and so on. And since 1972, we've had a Marxist model also imposed in India. So these 5 frameworks, they continue to control the history of India, and we will go in some detail in the course on these things. And if you take a mile-high view and try to simplify at the simplest level, why do these people do what they are doing? So we see that colonial people, Eurocentric and missionaries were driven by the overarching idea that Christianity is the only true religion and superiority of the white Europeans. The socialist academia and Marxists were driven by the overarching idea that by destroying Hinduism, you can get a classless utopian fantasy society, right? This is what Karl Marx had wanted, that the working class will rise one day and kill off the ruling classes and we'll have a classless utopian society. Those same ideas are imported by these guys. And for them, the old order for them is Hinduism, right? So they have to destroy Hinduism. So we see colonial people, they wanted to uphold Bible chronology because the Bible in those days said God created the world in 4004 BCE, but the Puranic chronology is going back thousands of years before that. So how is that possible? The only way they could reconcile that was to distort the Purana chronology. So they wanted to uphold the Bible chronology, show Hindus as primitive, backward, stagnant, superstitious, discriminatory, and to show superior to the white Europeans, to promote Christianity. The socialists want to do subaltern studies, history from below, right? They introduced oppressor-oppressed conflict dynamics. Excuse me. They soften the impact of Islam. Islam is presented in a very soft way, if you will. And the Marxists to show class conflicts. Everything in India is a history of class conflicts, only one class fighting the other class and such thing. That's all there is to history, right? And everybody wants to be a victim today in wokeism. Thankfully, Trump of DEI has been killed off. If not, it would have been even worse of a cancer. But then Islamism and wokeism are also on the picture over here. And they claim similar kind of things, show Hindus as primitive, claim that there are oppressors oppressing them, to claim victimhood and all these kind of things. And in the southern part of India, we have got a deracinated framework. I must qualify that. Only in Tamil Nadu, we have a deracinated framework of Dravidianism, which shares similar ideas because it is in bed with Dravidian Christian movement, right? So it shares the same ideas and they promote that. So this is the motivation of agencies to control our identity even in the present. And you may say, big deal, why are we concerned about all these things? We are a technologically advanced society in India today, and we've got AI, we've got spaceships, we've got DNA medications and all these kind of things. Why do we care about the past? You should care because there are some issues over here. For example, this false narrative that Aryan invasion happened in 1500 BCE, then they say illiterate nomads from Central Asia, illiterate because they didn't have a script. They had an oral tradition, right? So these illiterate nomads, they destroyed the superior Harappan civilization and they're running around in India with caste, cow and all these things. And they say India had to wait for 1000 years before civilization returned to India in Magadha after Alexandrian Greeks made contact with Patliputra, Magadha and other such places. Only then suddenly we got Brahmi script, Ashokan pillar, all these kind of things. We became civilized overnight after contact with the Greeks. Greeks civilized us. That's the implication over here. And they say, now you have not had enough time, gestation time for knowledge generation in mathematics, astronomy, medicine. So if you got superior works like Surya Siddhanta, Shushruta Samhita, and works like this, then you must have learnt it from the older civilizations, the Greeks, the Babylonians, and so on. So bottom line, they take away the adhikara, they take away the accomplishments of our ancestors and attribute it all to outside influences. So in this picture, they say Aryans brought Sanskrit into India. The Brahmi script came from the Semitic script called Aramaic that came from Levant, Israel, into India. They say that astronomy was brought by Babylonians into India. They say the math and sciences came from Greeks into India. Bhakti was taught to us by Saint Thomas, who landed in Muziris in Kerala, and he is the one who introduced Bhakti and other such things. They say Turkic Muslims, they got us culture, cuisine, architecture, music, civilization, and the British got us science, technology, rational thought. So what do you see in this picture? Indians have nothing to contribute to the world, nothing at all. We have been, after every invasion, these outsiders came and taught us and civilized us and educated us, and that's how we are clinging on at the fringes of civilization over here. So it greatly distorts the history of the Indian civilization, all the dates, anchor points of our chronology, every aspect of our knowledge systems and identity has been perverted. This is the stark reality. Who are we? Are we a bunch of oppressors, caste-ridden, discriminatory, superstitious people who worship monkeys and elephants and things of this nature as they portray us, with inhumane philosophies, who have no military might or any such thing because we are a divided society, has been invaded by everybody and have been teaching us all these things? Is this who we are? Is this what the evidence tells us? Very unfortunately, this is what our children are learning. Our children have internalized these kinds of things. There's a failure to inculcate a national identity because there is no positive narration of history. There is no evidence-based narration of history. There's an inability to connect to the past because everybody's disconnected over here. So as a scientist, I came to this problem saying that we need some scientific, rational, logical analysis of data, models, methods, frameworks, claims, and so on. And I said that there is so much data for history. You lift a stone and there is data. If you know what to look for, you'll find data under that stone. So there is data in archaeology, epigraphy, climate records, astronomy, traveler accounts, literature, oral records, religion, philosophy, paleontology, genetics. Anything, any area you go, there is some implication on the Bharatiya civilization. You should know what you're looking for and you'll find it. So we can take all of this data and then we can process it through various models. Models are our best understanding of some phenomena of reality. Reality is too complex. When I see some phenomena out there, how scientists study it is they make a model of it. A model can be a mathematical model, a linguistic model, a logical model, or any other kind of model have you. The idea is to capture that in some sense so I can take it to my computer or my lab and study it to understand this phenomenon. So in doing so, we encapsulate the boundary of the model. We say there are some assumptions that will go into the model and we put some constraints on the model so it's valid. Then we take some data and we have some methodology where we process it in the model, some methodology, we get some results. Then we analyze the results, we infer something and we make some claims. That is how we understand in science about reality and truth, understanding truth. So we can identify linguistics model, archaeology model, genetics model, astronomy model, and we study all these models in this course. So we study the assumptions, the provenance of the data, the methodology, what inferences and claims came out of that. Are the claims in accordance with the quality of the data, with the methodology that people have followed, with the assumptions that go into that model? That is how we study it. In the absence of that, people think any published paper is reality. So people go out there saying, this paper came in Nature. It's a genetics paper that came from Harvard University. Oh my God, what pedigree. And you're contesting that? Yes, sir, I'm contesting that because you must understand what is the data? How did they collect the data? How did they use the data? What is the mathematics over there? What quality of mathematics is it? What are the assumptions in those mathematics model? What kind of results can come? Is that claim narrow? Is it a very large claim? This is how we logically critique the claims. We don't irrationally. So that is what we do in this course. We study the claims in published works and we try to say where the issues are and the claims that come about. So over the last decades, I've been working on this issue. I've amassed a great deal of evidence in these things. So with an evidence-based rational examination, we can have a rebuttal to what I call enforced historiography, what has been forced on us. We can examine evidence from text, from archaeology, from genetics, from climatology, geology, and astronomy. This literally is a minefield. That's why I've shown barbed wire in this graphic over here. It's a minefield because you have to take every claim and you have to rip it apart from all the other embedded claims over there. It's not easy because you cannot just overturn one claim. You have to overturn the entire mass of claims that has been built over the last 200 years or so. That is the nature of the work that we're doing. But in this course, we logically try to understand some of these things. I'll give you a flavor of some of these things here. For example, internal evidence. We have got evidence. Our text, for example. What do the texts know about invasion or migration? Do they say anything about that? This is the common sense evidence, right? You take a bunch of authors from various geographies of India, from various chronologies of India, whether it's Abhinavagupta, Adi Shankara, Agathiyar, from Andal, and other such people, all the way to Yajnavalkya, Vyasa, Vishakadatta, and other people, Valmiki and others. You ask, who here is talking about Aryan invasion? Who here is saying that we used to live beyond the mountains, far away, we crossed those mountains and came and lived in this land? Who is saying that? Who is saying that we are two people, we are North Indians and they are South Indians? Who is saying that? Who is saying the South that we used to live in the North, then we were driven to the South and now we are living in the South, southern part of India? Who is saying that? Not a single person, not a single work anywhere, any topology, any geography, any chronology of India is saying this. This, my dear friends, is the reality. This is our history in our texts, various subjects. Nobody is saying these things. But then 200 years ago, colonialists came and put this idea that we are Aryans and Dravidians, and that is it. That's what we believe. So we have to evaluate those kind of claims to try to understand who we are. If you go to another field, archaeology. Now in archaeology, there is an underlying idea that we look at the ceramic record. Ceramic record means the pottery record. Right? If somebody new has come to your area, we expect that in that the archaeological layer, we must find a new technology of ceramics, a new style, a new other such things. So this is a notion that a new innovation has come into this civilization. But then in India, if we try to see in 1500 BCE, is there a new pottery record that has come into India? Guess what? Absolutely absent. Not only do we want to see in 1500 BC has a new pottery style come into India, we also have to show that that same pottery that was introduced into India has got a trail coming from somewhere. If it has come from Central Asia, we expect that we should see in Andronovo culture, we should see that. Bactria Margiana archaeological complex, we should see that. We should see that all the way into India, we should see it. We don't see anything of that nature. Nothing that will suggest that a migration has taken place, an invasion has taken place. We don't see that. So there is ochre colored OCP pottery. People try to present this as evidence of Aryan invasion by subverting the data. But then there are papers, for example, we analyze these things in our class. There are papers for like this, for example, that say there are some problems over here because we have found OCP going back to 4th millennium BCE. 3000 BC onwards and even earlier, we are finding OCP pottery in India. It is not something that Aryans brought 1500 BCE. And we got other styles of pottery like this, black and red ware, painted grey ware and other such things, but these are very unique to India. You don't find them even outside and so on. So the notion that it was introduced into India is nebulous. We cannot include that. So archaeology is really not showing much in the ceramic record. Further, archaeology and paleontology show great antiquity of human presence in India. There is no time to go through all of these things, but I have some talks out there that you might like to see, where I'm showing, for example, there are artifacts in Tamil Nadu, for example, from 1 million years ago that we can identify as stone tools left behind by another species of humans called Homo erectus that also used to live in India. Now, speciation is not hard and fast, right? It is not as if Homo sapiens were newly invented, they came out of the mud or whatever. No, we are here because earlier ancestors were there. Like species like Homo erectus and even earlier. That's why it's a continuum, right? It's a continuum from there on and so on. So we are seeing, for example, Narmada man, skull from 350,000 years ago. Athirampakam in Tamil Nadu, artifacts are there from 350,000 to 180,000 years ago. All of these things are showing that modern humans, there's a reason why we call them modern, because skull capacity and things of that nature, have been living in India continuously for a very long time, contrary to genetics that asserts that modern man came into India from Africa about 80,000 years ago. Contrary to that, we are seeing evidence of various other things. Then at least from 40,000 years ago, Bhimbetka, other places we're seeing cave art, tools, ports and settlements in Pumpuhar. We got offshore finds that go back to 18,000 years ago, 125 meters below the Bay of Bengal. We are seeing man-made harbors. We are seeing structures over there that can be dated to the last glacial maximum going back to 18,000 years ago. Edakal in Kerala, Birana, we are seeing 10,000 years ago artifacts, underwater artifacts from Dwaraka, and very what I call recent artifacts from 5,000 years, Harappa, Saraswati, Ganga Plains, Kiradi, Arikamedu, Pattanam. So bottom line, throughout India, we are seeing occupation, habitation by humans for a pretty long period of time, continuously. This is what we are seeing. Plus, we also know that there's a continuity of civilization. For example, Bibi Lal, he had pointed out in an early paper of his, later in his career, that if somebody comes and tells you that there's a Harappa period followed by a Vedic period and such things, he said that does not bear out in the archaeological record. He is saying that there is cultural continuity that is clearly evident in the archaeological record. For example, in Mohenjo-daro, we are seeing the Pashupati seal, the very famous, what we say, proto-Shiva with the yoga asana position and other such things. What is that doing? If the Aryans had brought yoga and Hindu ideas into India, what is that doing in Mohenjo-daro? Then we are seeing terracotta figurines of females with the sindoor symbol. Married women wear the sindoor symbol. This is something that is found in Harappa, but is a Vedantic concept. And you're seeing the Namaste pose, for example, in Harappa. This is also a Vedantic concept which says the Narayana in me is bowing to the Narayana in you. This is again an Advaitic Vedanta concept. What is that doing in Harappa? Swastika, the Shivalinga in Kalibangan, Yoga Asana positions. All these things, including many other recent finds, establish to us that there is a continuity of civilization. We cannot say Harappa period, Vedic period, as if they're disjoint and so on. There's a cultural continuity. That's what comes out of these things. The river Saraswati, such a big issue. We will devote time in the class to study the claims made by various people, Romila Thapar and various others, who try to subvert this evidence in any way possible. But science tells us, this is one such example, this paper over here, published in Nature, that is saying that there used to be a perennial river flowing throughout the year in Harappa heartland. This dashed line that you see paralleling the Indus, this is the path of the ancient Saraswati river. And the Saraswati river used to be fed by Sutlej. Sutlej used to feed into Saraswati at one point in time. But after tectonic plate movements in northern India, this is a Himalayan tectonic region, remember that. After that, the Sutlej changed its course and started feeding into the Sindhu river, and that starved the Saraswati river. Similarly, Yamuna was feeding into Saraswati, but after tectonic movement flowing eastwards, and this too starved the Saraswati river and it went dry. Why is that important? Because Saraswati river is mentioned Rig Veda. In many references to Rig Veda is there, and the question comes, when did the Saraswati river dry up? Geology tells us by 1900 BC this river had dried up. When if the Aryans supposed to have come to India? 1500 BC. How can they come, see a non-existent river and mention it as a powerful flowing river from the mountains to the ocean and things of this nature? Issues are there. The leftists try to project this, that is a river they encountered in Afghanistan on their way to India and all that nonsense. But science today is clearly telling us a lot of things here. Additionally, we have found literally hundreds of settlements, archaeological sites have been found along this ancient Saraswati river banks. Remember, you always had to situate a settlement by a river bank, right? That's why you need fresh water. So how do you do that? You have to be next to a river. Today there's no river here, but you find archaeological sites. Another powerful reminder that in the past there was a river flowing here. And to give one such example, this is a paper from Deccan College where they had conducted radiometric, radiocarbon dating on artifacts recovered from these archaeological sites where Saraswati Sindhu have been found. And they found, for example, I've highlighted over here in Birana, 7570 BCE, that is 9500 years before present. That is the earliest samples they got from Birana. It just gives you an idea of the kind of antiquity of settlements in India by the river banks at this time frame. And this antiquity upsets a lot of people when I talk about this. But then we are seeing this antiquity supported by astronomy in India. It is supported by the genetics understandings in India. It is supported by archaeology in addition. So we are seeing all of these things. So it is not as fantastic as it appears. These are factual data that we have today. They have also found chariots in the Saraswati Sindhu civilization. This is in Sanauli. If you go to Sanauli, this is recently they found chariot burials. And the archaeologist Manjul, he has declared that these are not donkey carts. These are not bullock carts. These, he said, are horse-driven chariots based on the analysis of these chariots. He's also found whips made of horsehair. He's also found that these are war chariots because he's found shield, helmets, including women and men, both who went into war in these chariots. So he's found all these things. This is there in India much before the Aryans are supposed to have brought a horse and chariot to India in 1500 BC, but we are seeing this going back to 2200 BC. To give you an idea of the imposed historiography of India, I request all of you to go to Wikipedia and search for Sanauli. You will find that they declared this as donkey chariots, donkey-driven carts. It came from the declaration of Witzel, Michael Witzel, who wrote a book with Romila Thapar and with Razib Khan a few years ago. Over there, he made a declaration sitting in his room in Harvard University. He made a declaration that these are donkey carts. Who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe academics sitting in a closed office room years together doing that? Or will you believe the field archaeologist sitting in the field, analyzing the data and telling you what he has found? I will go with archaeologist because he's got the data. He's able to make that call, not the academic who's trying desperately to support his career findings. So I wouldn't trust that. If we talk about iron, right, there's this notion that iron came into India thanks to the Aryans. Aryans had discovered iron and they got superior swords made out of iron, and they were able to defeat the Harappa people who had this copper-based instruments and so on. Somebody commented on the audio. I hope the audio is okay. I'm using the microphone as usual, so I hope the audio is fine. So anyway, so what we are seeing is that iron has been there in India for a pretty long time. For example, when this was published by this Japanese professor in 2018, the oldest iron discovered in India was in Gachibowli, Hyderabad. In the University of Hyderabad campus, Professor K.P. Rao, he had found knives, blades, swords and everything in the University of Hyderabad grounds. And those were radio dated and OSL dated and other such things. And they came with a date of 2200 BCE to 2400 BC for iron. So clearly, iron was in India much before the so-called Aryan invasion. And I'm very happy to tell you, I keep updating the course that I have because we are use the methodology of science. It should constantly take new findings. They might invalidate earlier findings or they might support earlier findings. I'm glad to say that 15 days ago, we had this report in Times of India and other works in January 24th, 2025. You can Google for this, where the Tamil Nadu government reported on archaeological finds in Shivagalai, which is close to I think Krishnagiri in Thoothukudi district in southern India. They found in a burial, they found iron artifacts which have been dated now to 3300 BCE. 1000 years before Gachibowli, right? So what does this mean? This is a staggering find. This means that the first place in the whole world where iron was discovered was in India. It was not in the Hittites. It was not in the Egypt. It was not in any of those places. It was in southern India that we discovered iron first. And this technology that was discovered by archaeological sites by this Japanese professor, it also shows this technology migrating northwards, right? It is showing that the earliest iron now we know is in Thoothukudi in Tamil Nadu, in Gachibowli and other such places. As you go to northern India, we are seeing earlier and earlier dates. If iron had come to India from northwest of India, we expect the oldest archaeological iron to be in Pakistan and places like that before we come into India. But that is not true. It is going outside of India. This is a technology that is going out of India. So such interesting finds are there. Genetics, huge area, and it's very inconclusive to say the least. And I'm not going to talk much because there is so much to talk about genetics. I have concerns with the methodology, with what kind of models have been selected. What is the methodology adopted to make these claims, the mathematical models? What is the data that has been used? The population sizes, the selected populations. What is the sample size? What are the claims that have been made out of these things? I've got concerns with all of these areas. And so one has got to evaluate the claims very, very carefully. You cannot make blanket claims on this 1.5 billion population, but you can only make very, very narrow claims in the context of the limited data that you have, the limited accuracy of the methods. You can make limited claims, but we don't see that. We see these bombastic claims in papers that simply cannot be accepted. So if somebody talks to you about the presence or absence of a genetic, no problem about that. Why? Because we can verify it. If I say that I have a mutation and somebody in this audience does not have that mutation, guess what? We can go to a lab, take the blood sample, saliva sample, whatever, and you can say, yes, this person has that mutation, that person does not have. This is a fact. No problem with that. So this is, in fact, we use this for our medicine today. So much of our medicine is genetics based. It is based upon these factual ideas. But then in ancestral genetics, they say some percentage of markers in a population is there. The direction of genetic flows from outside. For example, they might say that northern India, they got some percentage of Central Asian genes, R1A or whatever. And they might say that, and they may further claim that the flow of genes is from there to here. Now that is a problem. We cannot conclude these things with the methodology that we have, with the data that we have, with the models that we have. We cannot make such a claim. That is what I analyze out these issues over here. Then finally, these people say that we have a percentage of inheritance from an old sample. They might find the radiocarbon dated sample in Central Asia, maybe some inheritance from 3000 BCE, and they'll say I found a genetic link to India and the flow is from there to here. Utter bogus, utterly bogus. If you know the mathematics used, you'll see that it cannot support that. That's why I show a downward arrow here, showing my lack of confidence. Okay, here I'll contest this, and this I'll totally reject, some of these things. So in the course, we'll have at least 2 classes devoted to genetics where we talk about that. Another big area is astronomy, right? Now the problem is Indian astronomy, in the text that we have, show far greater antiquity than suggested by this Aryan invasion. According to Aryan invasion idea, these illiterate nomads from Central Asia came to India with an oral tradition, and all the Vedic literature was composed in India. It was composed in India. Rig Veda was composed in India. Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, everything composed in India, not outside. Why? Because these Vedas are talking about the geography of India. They're talking about the rivers of India. They have the cultural context and the geography of the country. They cannot have been composed on their way from Central Asia to India. So they are saying that these works have been composed in India after 1500 BC. But we have a major problem because these same texts have got astronomical observations which we can date with our fine tools that we have today very precisely to an ancient period of time far beyond 1500 BC. How is that possible? So some of the examples that we discuss in the course, Vedanga Jyotisha, winter solstice Dhanishta Nakshatra, this can be dated to 1440 BCE. The Vishnu Purana has got an episode of Dhruva as a pole star and his mother Sumati standing next to him in the pole star. This can only be possible in 2800 BCE. Kritika at the vernal equinox in Shatapatha Brahmana, Rishi Yajnavalkya, can be dated to 2900 BCE. The planet clustering in Revati Nakshatra, which we identify as a Kali Yuga, 3102 BCE. Aditi in Aitreya Brahmana associated with Rig Veda. It talks of the vernal equinox at Punarvashu. This can be dated to 6000 BCE. Markandeya Purana talks about a story of Ashwins in the winter solstice. This can be dated to 7200 BCE. These are some things that we'll verify in this course by using planetarium software. We see the text where it appears, the context where it appears, and see these things, and clearly showing that Indian astronomy is that ancient. It calls out that ancientness. So in summary, what are we doing here? Scientists will examine evidence and discard the outlier. Always we discard the outlier. In statistics, if I collect a whole lot of data, if I want to make some mean and variance, guess what we do? We look at the outlier, one outlier, and the remaining is much more accurate. This is what we do. So here we see a crisscrossing of evidence and antiquity in the text. Astronomy, archaeology, paleontology, genetics, climatology, agricultural genomics, animal genomics, everything is sitting in an ancient period of time from 8000, 9000 BC to 3000 BCE. Linguistics alone with Aryan invasion is sitting here at 1500 BCE. So what we can conclude from this is an outlier and this has to be discarded. This model has got to be discarded, and this model is where our reality probably lies. And that is the conclusion of this course that we do. And in doing so, we will examine the evidence in great detail about these things. So in conclusion, what I would like to say is that Indian deep history, this is a term that I'm introducing, deep history, not proto-history, not prehistory, deep history. This, what is taught in schools and universities is utterly wrong. 5 agencies have enforced their ideology and frameworks. They control this historiography: Colonial, Eurocentric, missionary, socialist academia, and Marxist. They all use, till the present day, linguistics is used to uphold and prop up their narratives. We have found that it does not align with evidence from many other fields. Therefore, we can say linguistics stands falsified. So we have seen antiquity in archaeology, genetics, astronomy, texts. We have strong evidence to uphold the antiquity of the Indian civilization. And this evidence-based narration discredits this AIT, AMT, because this constrains Indian chronology to 1500 BC. By throwing this out, we can, with great confidence, we can reconcile some of the dates that we have in Indian history, which we can't do today. If you try to reconcile any of these things with today's linguistics constraint, the only conclusion you'll have is these works are unreliable. I will not use the Indian text because they're all unreliable. This is what Max Muller said. So that's one way to deal with inconvenient data. You kill the data, discredit the data and throw it out, and then you can work with it. So bottom line, there is still an urgent need to revise our education system. It is happening with the NAP policy, but maybe not at the speed at which we like it. So I offer 3 courses here at Hindu University of America. There's a 2-term course on reconstructing Hindu history. You've just seen an introduction to the commissions. Who are the people who commissioned such a history of India, what they did. In the omissions, we discuss the knowledge systems of India, the contributions and other such things, the second part of the course. I also teach a 1-term course on the astronomy of the ancient Indians, where we go into a deep dive on the Siddhanta methods and so on. And periodically, we also have retreats at the HUA campus in Florida, where we have experiential Bharatiya astronomy. With telescopes, we observe the nakshatras, rashis, and we learn a lot about methods and so on. So if you're interested, please look this up at HUA and feel free to support HUA and join one of these things. With that, we can come to question and answer. And like I said, nothing is trivial or silly. So please go ahead and ask your questions. And you can search for me on YouTube and see my talks, or reach out to me on Twitter or Facebook. I'm also reached at this address. Okay, over to you, Ankur.
No, that was amazing, Dr. Vedam. Appreciate it so much. SM Krishnan says, it is good to see ideas from different branches presented in one place to rebut various narratives. Exactly. That's Dr. Vedam's expertise and what he's really honed in on. All those different frameworks and methodologies, and presenting them in such a structured way that rebuts their overall narrative that took them so long to construct. There are quite a few questions. I'm just going to drop a little bit of the details in the chat of the course right now. It's going to be on Saturdays at 9 p.m. Eastern until 10:30 p.m. Eastern. It's going to start April 12th. And as you can tell, there is so much information that Dr. Vedam has, and he dives deep in his course. And like he said, no question is too small. So let's get into some of your questions, including the reading materials. Dr. Vedam pulls information from everywhere. There's articles, there's books, there's videos, and in our learning management system, he outlines and makes it easy to share. So we have an LMS week by week. Ashokaji, I hope that answers your question. Raj Vedamji, you're working on a book too now, right?
Yes, it's a standing joke, but yes, I've been working on this book. It's a long project because this is not a simple subject, and the scope of the work is enormous. So
yeah. Teresa says it not only distorts the history of India, but also the rest of the world. All civilizations are impacted by the incorrect understanding of world history. Very true. Abhishek Ji is saying your treatment of thank you. Neeraj Ji says absolutely, blood boils. That's one of those things that kind of can make us angry, but it also gives us a pathway forward because we know we have to learn this. We can apply it. Poonamji is asking about Wikipedia. That is an ongoing challenge as well. Yes. Well, maybe some students can take that up as part of an initiative. Maybe we can look into that. But Wikipedia is just really just inculcated. It's subsumed in the colonial framework and all those other frameworks. And that's Really frustrating to see still on Wikipedia, I know. You've offered the astronomy course once so far, right? And then you
Yes,
offered the astronomy retreat. So that's going to be
yes.
coming up. Who's this? Dr. Ashish is looking forward to that. When are you going to be offering that course again?
After this cycle is over, let the cycle get over. There's a core course at HUA, so let this two-part course be over. Then we will take up the astronomy course again.
Yeah. And so this course applies to the certificate program in Hindu studies, as Dr. Vedam says. This is a core course. So if you're getting a whole certificate in Hindu studies, um, it's not just about getting one class or one piece of information that you can then send on WhatsApp. It's about having a coherent narrative and understanding it so that you can share this in circles with other people and challenge the framework. Dr. Ashish is also asking, okay, here, what do you exactly mean about the linguistic data on which leftists base their arguments? So maybe you could take some time to really
Sure, sure,
deconstruct
sure.
their linguistic argument and what data they're using.
Right, right. So, like I said, when William Jones observed that Sanskrit, Latin, and Greek are related, so the methodology that evolved, the field of linguistics itself came about to address this kind of relationship, why that came about. So, how do you study languages? So, what they did was Sanskrit provided the framework. It was the way our letters and consonants are arranged, right? If you were to take a look at the Aksharamala, for example, you got ka, ka, ga, ga, nga, cha, cha, ja, ja, na, ta, ta, da, da, na. We have got things of this nature. In other words, when Panini had arranged these things, he arranged it phonetically. For example, how is the sound made? When I say pa, my lips come together, right? When I say ta, my tongue rolls backwards and hits the jaw upwards. If I say ta, my tongue hits the back of my teeth, right? So where is the sound made? Is it made in the back of the throat? If I say ka is coming from the back of the throat. If I say pa, it's coming from here, right? So this is the phonology. So we see as far as the structure is concerned, the phonology, how the sound is made, and you understand the structure of sounds and so on. So in linguistics, what they did is they try to take what they call cognates. Cognates means the words with the same meaning. For example, if I say in southern Indian language, halu in Kannada is milk, pal in Tamil is milk, right? Palu is milk. So these are cognates, things of that nature. So they said, if you're going to address the European languages and Indian languages, let us take 100 words of common usage in an agrarian society. For this is called Swadesh list, for example. Take these cognates, we'll try to see how the sound morphs from one place to the other. For example, if you go to Maharashtra, you'll see that they call Vrindavan, right? If you go all the way to the east to Bengal, Vrindavan becomes Brindavan. So the va became a ba. It morphed, right? It became the syllable morphed. So those are the kind of things they study. And in doing so, they came conveniently with what they call sound laws, various sound laws. They said, here is an earlier form of sound, that is a later form of sound, like ba is an older form than ba, then pa, then fa, right? So those kind of relationships came about with ideas of chronology. This is an older form, it's a newer form. By doing that, they'll trace when this word is morphing, this is the path in time that it is morphed because of migrations and things of this nature. All speculative, and everything grew in a quick fix kind of way. Whenever they found a counterexample, they'll bring a new rule to patch over that counterexample and go. That is not science. That is not science. That's not the way science grows. But anyway, this is the way linguistics grew initially. And today it is developed into something more, but these earlier assertions have to be questioned. When you say there's a chronology, you have to question that. Today there are things like glottochronology. There are things like comparative linguistics. There are many other computational linguistics. Many fields are existing out there today, lexicostatistics and things of this nature. And yes, these are computational means to try and understand sound, but fundamental assumptions need to be evaluated. So this is why I say that linguistics alone cannot be used to try to address our past. It has got to be used in conjunction with many other fields, multidisciplinary evidence. If it does not align, throw those things out. One more paradox which we'll learn in the course is that the data to 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 reconstruct the Proto-Indo-European language. Where was the data? If you say there was an ancestral language called PIE, where did the data come from for that language? That data came from Sanskrit. Sanskrit provided most of the data using which they worked backwards to try to reconstruct the sound using the laws that they were proposing. For example, the Sanskritam word called chakra, chakra is for wheel is chakra, right? They propose it came from Proto-Iranian word called keklos, or some such thing, which came from Proto-Indo-European called kweklo. So kweklo became some, kekro became chakra. Where is the evidence? Zero evidence. The only evidence is chakra. Chakra is a real word used even today. From that they work backwards. Then they established PIE as a fact, turned around and made Sanskrit into a derived fact, a derived issue. So there's failed methodologies in science to do that. That's what I mean. Anyway, I will not go too deep into that. So let's go to
No, that was a great explanation, right? It really illustrates their circular logic, their speculative their reconstruction of history to fit their narrative, while we're
yes.
actually presenting our history with evidence. Dilipji is asking, can the linguistic model be reconciled with the out of India movement? So I know you really touched on how they work backwards,
Very
and I think
quickly.
it does illustrate that out of
Very
India
quickly.
movement. But that out of India theory is so big and important.
Right. So we have a researcher called Shrikant Telegiri. I also see Kamlesh Kapoorji has raised her hand. We'll go to her next. So I see he's a researcher who has been addressing several of the claims from ancestral linguistics and addressing this migration, other such things. And he has made a declaration that none of are true for Proto-Indo-European if the homeland is in Central Asia. If the homeland for the ancestral language is situated between Caspian Sea and Black, he said there are so many paradoxes, so many issues are there. He's also on record saying that if the homeland is located in northwest India, in Punjab region, he said all these paradoxes vanish. All these paradoxes vanish. So his notion is if you situate the homeland in Punjab, then all the issues that you have, they all vanish and is not valid anymore. So yes, there are people like that trying to reconcile if it's an out of India, can we access the linguistics idea? Again, it's not in toto, understanding everything. There are concerns with several of these things. Questions that we must ask is, has linguistics addressed even one success story in European languages? Has it predicted that this will morph into that language? To my knowledge, not even a single success story is there that can predict that. In fact, there are issues that have come about. So it serves as a model. Let's not diss the model. It is a model that has got limited applicability and purpose, and we'll go with that. Maybe it can evolve into something more when we start talking about AI, natural language processing. All these ideas are of great value. But if you apply it to this migration, invasion ideas, there are several problems. You have to analyze the constraints, the assumptions, other such things, validate so many things. That's why I say, if you can reconcile with other lines of evidence, maybe we can accept it. But what we have shown is that linguistics is sitting out there, whereas the rest of the things are sitting here. So we have a problem over there.
Great. We had a
Let's
couple
go.
of people asking. The course starts April 12th. It's going to be on Saturdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. Let me just launch a quick poll. Let us know if you are interested in enrolling. Let us know yes, no, definitely, maybe. That helps us do the follow-up so that we can get you enrolled in the course. Dr. Vedam, you can pull out questions that you see that you want
I see
to
that
take. I know
Kamlesh ji has
you
raised
have,
her hand. So let me go with Kamlesh ji. She raised her hand. So Kamlesh ji, please go ahead. Please unmute yourself and ask a question. Is Kamlesh Kapoor still on the call? Yes, please unmute
yeah.
yourself.
Do you remember me in 2016?
Yes, I remember very well. I remember very well. And your book is also very valuable. So yes, I do remember you, Kamlesh ji.
all the data that you have presented, I mean, it is absolutely fantastic. But instead of reconstructing, we write our own history. I did not reconstruct and say that these are the distortions. I simply started where was the rest of the world in 15,000 BC or 10,000. It was under ice. So the geological reference to the formation of the Grand Canyon shows that what were the earlier layers of the earth or the mountains and how they were submerged, the water level. So except for Greece and Rome and a few of the North African places, Alexandria and stuff, the rest of them were under the ice age. And it ice age kept on coming, going back, kept on coming, going back. With this alone, I reconstruct everything.
Very true. Very
Where
true.
were you in 8000 BC? You were not there because there was ice age,
Right.
dating ice age. And that is. The second point is take the globe with you because globe, you know, planet Earth globe.
Right.
If you put it round and round a few times, you will show that the civilization always began in the tropics,
Right.
between 33 north to 33 south. And since the land mass in that tropical area is mostly in Asia. So what is the chance that South Africa, Ecuador or El Salvador, they had the origin of civilization? Because they are so narrow, sandwiched into mountains. And then you understand the ecology of India, that Vedas, the crisscross of rivers and their antiquity, nobody knows. So this one evidence, please incorporate. And
Certainly.
that we consider. They were not
Certainly.
there. So, thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you for this very nice insights, Kamlesh ji. So in the course, I am addressing your first point where you talked about after the ice ages, where could civilization have been possible? I have presented, excuse me, evidence from genetics or yes, genetics, from agriculture, from animal genomics. So much is there to say about the time period between 10,000 BC to 8,000 BC. The current narratives try to position agriculture as having come the Neolithic time frame from Anatolia, which is Turkey, today's Turkey. But then the evidence is showing otherwise. So that also I present in the course, and yes, so we'll use those wonderful ideas you talked about. Thank you, Kamlesh ji. Any other questions?
Yeah, in the Q&A box, I think you answered some of these questions in part of your genetics. Some scientists and genetics make strong claims about history and migrations and origins and try to tie that to fit the same narrative.
Right.
How to linguistic challenge genetic models of origin of societies and patterns of migration.
That's a good
and
question.
then this SK is asking several questions along that line, right? The evidence to finally put AIT to rest. Conrad Else, they mentioned, one said that translations of the Indus script will be clinching evidence. So going into that new translation, I think you took that first one a little earlier, right?
Let me quickly walk through those, Ankur. So the very first question, SK, is the genetics people make use of chronological constraints imposed by linguistics. The mathematical models of genetics are unconstrained. They admit a variety of solutions. In order to focus it in the region of interest, they put upper bounds and lower bounds in the optimization models. When they're searching for parameters that fit ancient models to current models, they put constraints. Those constraints come from linguistics. So it's a circular argument in a way. And so there's no question of challenging, because they try all the time to align with linguistic ideas. Second question, your view, what's needed is clinching evidence to finally put AIT. AIT is at rest. Nobody accepts the invasion theory. Even the people who propose invasion have backed off from that. But what they're now talking about is a migration theory. And that migration theory also does not hold because of all these factors that we talked about. It's not a slugfest. Like Kamleshji was saying, we just need to write our works. We need to go out there and write our works and boldly go and say, this is our history. This is a political solution. It is no longer scientists and researchers saying, we have already said what is there to be said. Political solution now needs to come out there and make these things happen. SK, what are your thoughts about one common ancient civilization? Okay, Graham Hancock is talking about the pre-Neolithic time frames. That is before 10,000 BC. He's talking about the Ice Age. He's talking about civilization existed there. It's I will not go there at this point, but antiquity has shown that Indians had continuity for a pretty long period of time. Anita, thank you for the explanation. Can you explain who the Aryans as a people are? See, Anita, this whole course and my 300 plus talks have been to reject this notion of Aryan. We don't even know what that word means. Okay, in India, we know what Arya. Arya is an honorific. A gentleman is called an Arya. For example, in Mahabharata, Dushasana is called Anarya, not an Arya because he tried to disrobe Draupadi in the court, right? So we have used Arya in the honorific, never in the ways that the British put on us as Aryan. The English word Aryan is implying a racial category. What is race? Is it level? Is it something else that you can identify? No, race is a social construct. It does not exist at the scientific level. So I reject terms like Aryan, Dravidian, so on. We will learn in our course genetics, something called FST, fixation index and others. We have seen that India is such a mixed population that if there were ancestral populations that are distinct, uncover them today because we are all similar. We cannot be clustered into different genetic metric buckets like North Indian, South Indian, Brahmin, Kshatriya, Shudra. We cannot, looking at the genetics of people, we cannot cluster them into buckets. So all these notions are spurious. So I see red when people use the word Aryan or Dravidian. That simply doesn't exist. Okay, SK, the population density of northern parts of Bharat is very different from the south, or was it more or less evenly distributed? So this is something that people have to research on, right? The population density. We know that the Ganga plain supported a lot of life because there was a lot of water, very fertile Himalayan soil over there. Agriculture could grow well, and so it could support a huge population. As you go to southern India, you cross the Vindhya mountains, you have the Deccan Plateau, which is pretty high up, and you have some arid climate, you've got some pretty good climate. So one has got to see these things. Our evidence is showing the oldest human habitations were in southern India. That is the evidence. So let's go with evidence over there. Vijay, good to see you, Vijay Khane. Ashok, what are the reading materials? Yes. After every course, I give reading materials. I upload PDF files and documents of papers, of articles, sometimes of books and so on. So that is the reading material for this course. Nitin, how do you explain the language similarities with European languages? So the leading theory that most people now have among the people who are Indic researchers is it is an out of India. We have got textual evidence of out of India. The Sarajnya battle, for example, is talking about an outward migration, the Bharata people who have who took part in the Bharata war, rather. So talking about outward migration and so on. So there are people who are trying to see who are these people and where can they geographically be identified from. You can refer to some recent books, for example, by G.S. Ravi, who's talking about identifying some of these things. You can read Srikant Thalagiri, who is also talking about the similarity of language of different places. So the similarity is thanks to an out of India migration in various periods of time. In our course, we will learn that 2000 BCE, India suffered a 200-year monsoon failure. 200 years monsoon failure around 2000 BC, followed by Saraswati River drying up, which means water scarcity in India led to outward migration, and there is so much evidence which we will examine in the course. Arun, if we assume that Sanskrit came to existence de novo in ancient Bharat, then does that take care of the linguistic model as being an outlier? All languages are dynamic. Languages keep morphing, keep changing, unless you come in with a strict grammar and don't allow change to happen and such things. You have language police that won't allow new words coming and so on. Languages are always dynamic. So we don't know what Sanskrit would have evolved from. If we are saying that people lived in India for 1 million years and even longer, the question that we must ask is, what did they use to communicate? Now, we will learn in our course that the faculty of language comes from a genetic mutation called FOXP2. There's a gene called FOXP2. FOXP2 is what confers the ability to converse, to have conversation. The chimpanzee people don't have that. So they don't have the vocal range that we have to have communication that we have. And there are scientists who are trying to say this mutation may have come only in the modern human and maybe from 200 to 300,000 years ago. So which means even the Homo erectus might not have had language ability the way we have. But at any rate, some communication have been there in the early past which would have led to Sanskrit. We should not go with the notion that Sanskrit has been there forever. No, sorry, it has evolved into that at some point. And we have to see that. Godin, how much and who is currently accepting these ideas? I don't know. But as scientists, we are evaluating the truth. And I'm applying nothing more than the methods of science over here to look at the data, claims, and where the reality is. Who's accepting the idea? Well, the people who are convinced by the science. Yes. HK, is it not true description of flora and fauna in the Vedas entirely South Asian, not Central Asian or European? Yes, that is very true. That is true that it is talking about the geography, the flora of India, the fauna of India, all that is there in the Vedic literature, clearly showing a geocentric location here, geolocated in India. That's where these things are composed. Then we are seeing Kutyala. What is pre-learning required for these courses? Not much. I don't think there's any pre-learning as such because I present the reading material that is needed, and every one of my lectures in the course typically has about 30 minutes to 45 minutes of question and answer. So where I address all your concerns, all your questions, and so on. So I don't think anything beyond a college degree is needed. So don't bring some high schooler or some middle school kid to join this because content is clearly postgraduate. It is at the level of college graduate and postgraduate. Because we are analyzing scientific papers, we're making inferences, claims. That line of argument may not be easy to follow for a high schooler. So, Anita, thank you. My father vehemently opposed Aryan theory growing up in America. I noticed very difficult Western teachers expound and press further. Thank you. Thank you, Anita. And I hope to see you in the courses or talks. Krishna, can genetics decide caste as claimed? So I made an allusion to that, Krishna. There is no way anybody anywhere can take genetic samples and say this is North Indian, South Indian, Shudra, Kshatriya, Brahmin. Studies have been done, and I will quote many of those studies. For example, there is one study that was done in Uttaranchal by Gyaneshwar Chaubey and others about a few years ago, and they tried to see in Uttaranchal at least, can we take the genetic samples and do they resemble the Chaturvarna system? Can we cluster the genetics of people in Himachal Pradesh into these various buckets? He said, no, simply not possible. They're so mixed even there that you cannot even do any of these things. Like this, studies have been repeated not only in this place, also in Tamil Nadu, also in Karnataka, also in Andhra Pradesh, also a study that was done in PLOS biology, I think genetics, I think. It was done for entire India. Foreign study was done to try to cluster Indians into Dravidian, Aryan kind of buckets. Nothing. Everything came out with these similar notions. Ramesh, how about the distortion evolution of dharma concepts? Yes, that is true. So this is a different part. This is a different part in the knowledge systems. When we talk about knowledge systems, I address some distortions. So in this first part of the course, which is term 1, we are only talking What are the claims put on the Bharatiya civilization? How can we analyze them? Where is the evidence for that? And what are our conclusions? After having established that India is an ancient civilization, then in part 2, we go to what are the knowledge systems developed by Indians and distortions that the British and others missionaries have done. We'll address that in the second term. Okay, I think I covered all the questions.
Yes, that was all of the questions in the Q&A box. I know some people put some questions in the chat. I tried to those earlier. If you can, if you have another question that wasn't answered, please put in the Q&A box. The poll is up. Please let us know if you're interested in enrolling in the course. I'm putting the link to the course one more time in the chat. It's going to start April 12th. So you still have a little bit over, almost 2 months to figure out your schedule and enroll in this first of 2 parts that Dr. Vedam kind of has alluded to it and how he breaks up the information. It's so much information, but he really does it justice, and it takes 2 quarters to get through all of that information. And there's just so much reading and all of that stuff that you can get into on your own. And again, Dr. Vedam takes the questions, he answers them, he'll elaborate, he'll point you in the right direction to find out more. Dr. Vedam, it is always a pleasure to have you on. You are, just a star of Hindu University of America. We're so glad to have you. I know you can be offering another retreat, right? We were talking about that also, but once we plan that out in some details, we'll do another webinar on that as well. Okay, folks, last chance to get your questions in. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it to Dr. Vedam for closing thoughts. Other than I've taken both of his courses. I've taken 2 out of the 3 of his courses. They are wonderful. There's so much information. Please do enroll. You won't regret it. It is so much knowledge. It's so interesting. It's so engaging. And I highly recommend it. Yes, Uttaraji, just go to the website and enroll. As Dr. Vedam said, as long as you can put yourself through some rigorous study, it'll be a great course for you to enroll. Yep. And so with that, that is it from me. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Please do enroll in this next quarter at HUA, specifically in Dr. Vedam's course. Thank you, everyone. Let me give it to Dr. Vedam for closing thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you for those very kind words, Ankur. And I'd like to thank everybody who joined the webinar. I truly appreciate your support and interest in this course. And I hope to see most of you, if not all, if your schedule allows it, in this upcoming course. So thank you, and please support Hindu University of America. Namaste.